mute and wait for you and then, yes?
Well, you don't have to
Over here.
mute actually.
Okay.
You can stay as is.
Okay.
Okay, so we're ready. Yeah, attendees are ticking through, coming on board. Okay. Great. Okay, well, we're just about getting started now. So yeah, I can see a few more people who are joining. Excellent, fantastic. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Here we are, the end of the week. You've made it. Congratulations. Happy Friday. My name is Jackie Kasteen, and I'm the owner and managing director of Jackfruit Marketing. We help institutions and organizations around the world with their international marketing and recruitment. And I'm proud to serve as your symposium director for the week. So we've been working with BMI for several years now. The team, as I'm sure all of you know, is an absolute joy to work with. They have so much energy, such great team spirit, and they're always bringing out new things, which has proved no different this year. I'm sure all of you know how successful and popular their face-to-face student fairs are. And this year, they've taken all of that momentum and energy and pivoted to online events with their new platform, Talk Global Study, which now enables you to reach any student, anytime, any place. So it's a highly engaging platform. I do encourage you to add some of those recruitment events to your calendars for next year. And of course, we've all taken those peer-to-peer networking events online as well, such as the first ever online edition of the Global Scholarship Summit and Symposium. So I'm sure all of you have had a very busy week, packed with meetings, making new connections, catching up with old friends and familiar faces, and strengthening your international partnerships. Now, as a reminder, all of our symposium sessions are recorded, and I've popped that link into the chat there. So be sure to watch those recordings from Monday and Wednesday if you haven't done so yet. And there's also a fantastic variety of videos from your fellow attendees for you to learn more about institutions and scholarship organizations that joined us throughout the week. You'll see there that chat window, so do say hello to your fellow participants, share something with the group. If you've got a question, you can pop it into the chat there, or you can use the Q&A section as well. Please do get involved. This is our last session of the week, so it's your last chance to ask those burning questions to our speakers. And by default, you are, as an attendee, muted, but I can certainly unmute you as well, so we can also bring you into the conversation. So let's begin. I'd like to introduce our illustrious panel to our virtual stage. Please welcome Paula, Andrea, Henao, Ruiz, the Director of International Relations at ICETEX in Colombia. We have Lina Sevillano, the Chief of Unit for the Rowe Fund Program at OAS, based in Washington, D.C. in the U.S., and Ruth Roberts, the Director of International Scholarships with the Department of Higher Education and Training in South Africa. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you. So great to have you all here. So we've covered a lot of ground this week in the meetings and of course in the symposium summit. I'd like to first turn to priority areas for degrees. Now we know that STEM degrees have been increasingly important in recent years, but it's also been heartening to hear that governments are prioritizing other areas such as arts, hospitality, and tourism. These industries have been nearly brought to extinction by COVID. So they're kind of on our endangered list species right now for degree areas. So it sounds like there's some positive areas that scholarships might be able to play a role in helping to revive these sectors in the post-COVID era. But let's turn to our panel and see what they have to say about it. What can you tell us about the trends in demand changes that you might be seeing to industry sectors or degree areas that scholarships and funding organizations such as yours are prioritizing?
I think STEM fields of study are always going to be important and kind of prioritized, but I think that we're also seeing a growing demand for interdisciplinary studies. We're increasingly seeing that the traditional way of seeing study disciplines isn't really effectively addressing all the important issues that are arising in the 21st century. And I think that this has actually been exacerbated by COVID, because it's not just a health crisis. We've seen it impacting on society's mental health, poverty, women's issues, etc. So we're seeing our responses both from governments and institutions to have to bring together people from different fields to tackle these kind of issues. And that's across from sciences to humanities and social sciences.
On our side, for the Organization of American States, well, having the 4 pillars, including the democracy, integral development, human rights, and security, there is a pressing issue, and it's related to
Right, Ruth, it's happening.
Oops, sorry, I think we had a little technical issue there. Sorry, Lina, could you pick that up again for us, please?
Yes, definitely. That at the Organization of American States, having the 4 pillars and on the areas of democracy, human rights, and integral development and security, there is a pressing issue. We are comprised of 35 member states, 34 of them active, and the Caribbean region that comprises 16 countries are asking more and more, which is a need for environmental sciences, for preparedness, emergency preparedness, and issues related to life science as well. So in addition to the STEM field, which is very relevant, and in the area of life science and sustainability, it's one of them, in particular for the Caribbean and the region in general.
Okay, great. Oh, Paula, I think your screen might be frozen for a second there.
Well, I completely agree with what Lina's saying around sustainability. I think those kind of the issues that are emerging around climate change and sustainability, they're also becoming increasingly important and prioritized. And I think issues around sustainability do cross multiple different disciplines, because they can be interpreted in so many different ways, whether it's sustainability of our living environments or energy issues. There's so many different ways to see it, and different fields that would encompass that.
Food security, an area that agriculture and all that trickles down. I think that the data-driven, science is also picking up a lot, but in general for the Caribbean, that is crucial.
And do you think we're seeing more demand from students then for these fields in terms of, I mean, it's been quite a movement as well with the younger generation. They are very aware of the environmental issues that are plaguing us. This year in particular has kind of been a real spotlight on environmental concerns and sustainability, as mentioned. So do you feel like maybe that might be more of an interest for scholarship funds to really focus specifically on these kind of degree programs?
Yes, I was trying to answer. I don't know if you can hear me now. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we got you back. Very good. Thank you so much. Oh, I had faith that you would return. Great. You didn't miss much. Don't worry. Jump on in.
So yes, in Colombia, I was mentioning. Thank you. So yes, of course, we cannot just believe or think or act as if COVID wasn't here. Totally the opposite. I believe we have found from every single discipline the way to tackle this situation. So yes, STEM of course is very important, but we have seen an increased demand on the fields of social and humanities and health. So those are the areas. And also we have seen a decrease in scholarships from undergrad programs, and we have seen more interest in short-term courses as they are, easy to predict, let's say that. So that's what we have seen in Colombia so far.
Perfect. And that actually led right into my next question. So thank you so much for that, Paula. I was curious to hear from all of you about the demand changes, because we have heard earlier in the week as well, more interest in graduate level as opposed to undergraduate level. Short-term courses, micro-credentials, obviously if people are going overseas for those with quarantines and things like that, that's difficult. So we would imagine more interest in short-term courses for remote learning space. But tell me, me more. What are you seeing in terms of demand from your countries or priority areas for your programs?
Well, on my side, I can start on my side. With the scholarships, I'll give you an example of what we are doing with one partner. A partner that is offering 3,400 scholarships, full tuition waiver for any of the 600 online courses that this institution offers in either Spanish or English, and focusing on the STEM fields, engineering, computer science, technical skills in particular, because now it is very linked with adult learning and technical skills for those who are entering the workforce. So the institution provides open enrollment for a whole year, let's say for 2021, the whole year, for 3,400 scholarship recipients to take as many courses as they would like to. The platform has an algorithm that provides them with suggestions. So you already finished this course, why don't you take this other course, etc. And it is up to the beneficiary's own volition to keep taking courses, organize themselves. They also have support, technical support and mentoring as needed, because that is one of the things that we will be working a lot on, is training people to take courses online. Bottom line, once they finish the year, if they already took 3 classes, the system will offer them the possibility to complete a master's program. So what we are seeing right now is that, well, people are looking for online courses that can be taken with good quality and that they are affordable to a lot of people with clear skills. So that's kind of like an example of what we are doing.
Brilliant, brilliant example. And you mentioned that that has a STEM focus for those degrees. How are they choosing the providers that are eligible to offer these degrees for students?
So very good. It has to be a provider that has a very good reputation, that has very good programs evaluated, that has been in the market for a long time, and also that has the capacity, with a good platform, the capacity to also provide this kind of model. So how do they make the money? They make the money on the group of people who will choose to continue with a master's program. And the master's program is not going to be, you know, at a cost that is unreasonable. And that's how they make their money. So.
Mm-hmm. Great. Any other thoughts on changing in demand for short-term courses, micro-credentials, graduate level?
I already responded. I just wanted to add that we added to our policy of internationalization in Colombia from ICETEX. We depend on the Ministry of Education, but what we did is focusing really on cooperation. That's something that we have been working on really hard for the past months, and also in virtual environments. Remember that there was this we were thinking maybe not the virtual, maybe I go presence, but now that we were forced to stay at home, then a lot of people discovered this possibility. So we have been focusing on all these scholarships that provide these virtual or online courses. And we have had we have reached our goal, our objective for this year. And we are very surprised and very happy to see how we are working with our partners and allies to provide this possibility. So what we're doing is, for this year, we canceled all of the mobilities, but we are doing the virtual, this is like a blended type of courses. So we are focused on the virtual part of it this year, and then mobility next year.
Okay, how soon into next year? Have you made a call on that?
Can you repeat, please?
How soon next year do you foresee some face-to-face mobility happening?
So we had to make this very difficult decision on March to just close and postpone all of the scholarships that included mobility for 2020, the whole year, following the guidance of the guidelines of the government. And then for right now, we are thinking, we have opened some of the calls for March and on, but most of them for summer courses, because our universities here in Colombia, most of them have decided to wait until the summer to receive more students from abroad. Some of them are open and are willing to receive them, and what we do here is help them in that autonomous decision. But so far, hopefully by the June, July, we will be seeing a more normal environment again.
Okay, great. Good to hear. And do you think that some of that mobility might come down to a vaccine being available? If there's no vaccine ready, if it's not readily available for everyone, but still an institution has safety measures in place and the governments are allowing student mobility and visas can come through in time, would that enable you to then let the students take that leap and go abroad? Or is it, you know, there has to be a vaccine, otherwise we're not going to let them go? Do you have some policies on maybe when that mobility might start? Is it too soon to tell yet? Any
It is
thoughts for all of you?
uncertain, actually, yes. And we were discussing this earlier on, and it says it's so hard for us who make decisions about these important matters to make sure that we are making the right decision. So back in March, this decision of closing, you know, these possibilities, they were like hard, and we didn't know how people were going to respond. Finally, all of the government measures and policies came into place, and of course we are following them. So for us, the most important part is safety. We want to make sure everybody is healthy and taken care of. So insurance is a big issue right now. So insurance, making sure all of the measures are being taken place. And so that's something we are focusing on right now. We cannot say right now that we are waiting for the vaccine because nobody knows when this is going to happen. So we prefer to go on the line, just following and monitoring along with our allies and making decisions together. So it's not just on our side, it's not Colombia saying this. No, we are working with all of them in every single country to agree on the terms, and luckily and finally everybody's on the same page. And so we are deciding to open or not different calls. So for instance, if we had a call next week and it involved mobility for December or January, so we talked with the ally and we just decided not to. Let's wait and see what happens. And so we can be safe and sure about the decision.
On our side, I need to interject. We are actually doing the opposite. For 2021, the scholarships program will be almost exclusively online. So that is the portion of it. But speaking on the side of the financial aid, the Rowe fund, that's an interest-free loan that for Latin American and Caribbean students to study in the US. We continue helping individuals who are in the US. In fact, I need to say this, that when the pandemic came so quickly to the US and everything closed and universities closed their dorms, we immediately came up with an emergency scholarship. So providing not only the interest-free loan, but also the emergency scholarship to Latin American and Caribbean students who were stranded in the US. We are focusing right now in helping them complete their studies because there is a great chance with what is happening right now. We've seen them in the face of the students that they are struggling, not only because of the devaluation of the currency, their parents abroad are also struggling. In the words of one of the beneficiaries, we are here alone, isolated, far from our families, trying to do our best because many of them have the resilience and the determination to complete their studies, and we really want to help them. So we continue in person. So once they are here in the US, we are trying to help them as much as we can. But on the side of the scholarship for 2021, it will be only online. So that's my clarification.
Great, thank you.
From
Ruth,
our
please.
side, we actually haven't stopped any of the students going abroad where the borders are still open and where the scholarship providers are still implementing the scholarships and the institutions are still teaching. So while some of the countries decided to put their scholarships on hold for the 2020 academic year, we still managed to send students to Hungary, Sweden, Ireland, France, and those are all new scholarships that were taken up in the new academic year that's just started. So I think from our side, we would be relying on the governments, not just our government, but the government of the countries where our students are located to determine, whether the institutions are still open. And then many of the institutions are still doing blended forms of learning. So they would be doing partially online and partially contact learning. And we still have quite a number of students who remained in South Africa and are studying online at this time. But as long as they are able to go and the commercial flights are open and the visas are being issued, then we will still send the students, because I don't think at this stage we know whether they'll be safer here or there. We're all kind of playing a guessing game in a sense, because we don't know what's going to happen.
True. Yeah, it is an uncertain time, probably will be for the next 6 to 12 months as well. So I suppose the good thing is that we're already used to that uncertainty. Now we know it's not as much of a shock factor maybe as it was back in January, February, March. Interesting to hear that students are still going out of South Africa and being supported in that way. How are you finding things with their visa processes and flights? We also are quite concerned that perhaps, flights aren't taking off as much as they used to, obviously. So flight paths are restricted or extremely expensive. Maybe some of you saw some institutions in the UK had also chartered flights for some of their students. How might you be supporting students physically to get overseas if and when those borders do open up?
All of our scholarships are implemented on government to government through relationships with government. So the visa side was not really an issue for us. Difficulty was around the flights, because here in South Africa, there were no commercial flights until the beginning of October. So many of our students who were traveling abroad had to leave on repatriation flights. So these were flights that were actually intended for, in those cases, Europeans to get home. And we managed to get our students onto those flights, which were very few and far between and very expensive. So there were obviously budget implications for that as well. And the same happened at the end of the previous academic year, when a lot of our students were completing their studies, and we had to keep them in their host countries for additional couple of months because there were no flights available for them to return home. So it's all had, we've had to operate with so much uncertainty, with budget changes, extra costs involved to make sure that no one gets stranded in a foreign country and come home when they need to, or depart and start their studies when they need to. It's been a difficult year, I must say.
It's been a difficult year, Ruth, and here we had a lot of our foreigners that are studying or working here with us as teaching assistants. They were supposed to go back in May, but of course they couldn't. So we needed to provide them with a new allowance. So the stipend, we opened that budget. We didn't have that budget before. So we had like an emergency budget just to make sure they received the allowance, because also the agreements with the university were finished by May. So I have to say it was an effort between the universities and the government of Colombia just to make sure they were okay and they could stay here in Colombia as well as possible. So now we are providing them with, of course, the first flight available so that they can return home. So of about 200 of them, we just are missing about 8 that are still trying to find their way back home. But we are just very fortunate to say all of them are okay. So that for us was like really a challenge. And of course, their visas expired here. So Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Colombia, of course, helped us in providing them with the documentation that they needed while they are here. And on the other hand, taking care of our Colombians abroad, I just have to stress and thank all of our partners all over the world, because they really took a very good care of them. So I never received one complaint about I'm just in the streets and I don't know what to do. No, everybody knew what to do. And some of them decided to come home earlier. And so we used a lot of humanitarian flights for that. So of course they had to show why it was so, all of them wanted to return, let's say that. But some of them decided, no, I'm staying. Like in China, some of them decided to stay, but the other ones needed to show the prioritization, because of course a lot of Colombians were out and were trying to get back home. So basically, those were the issues. Now with the visa, when they are leaving the country, some of them haven't been able to do that. So we decided to provide them with the stipend while they are still here studying, because universities in the US, for instance, open courses for them, but they already resigned their jobs or something. So we just needed to make sure they are receiving the money while they can make it to the presence classes, so in-person classes.
Yes, on our side, we also had a lot of the scholarship recipients had the choice if they wanted to come back, and we used a lot of humanitarian flights, and very expensive. And so, but that was, you know, helping them to be where they wanted to be at the moment. So.
Do you have a rough sense of what percentage of students are still overseas that decided to stay where they were and not return home? Like what percentage of funded students came back home throughout the course of this year, and what percentage stayed? Like you mentioned, Paula, they chose to stay in China. I get the sense it's a very small percentage, though, that decided to stay overseas.
Yes, Jackie, the ones that were working on their master's program and they still have 1 year to go, they decided to stay. But the ones that were coming and we were expecting them to come back, I believe about 90% of them have already returned. So we finally made them. But the other ones, of course, they started to stay because they say, I already invested my time, even though it's a scholarship, I already invested my time and all of that, and I want my degree. So exploring this with the universities, they said you can stay, but of course it will be virtual or online classes. So it's an adjustment for everybody, but I believe just a few of them couldn't return on time. And I'm still expecting, actually, we're working from the office, making sure that the rest of them return in November and December, early December. So we are hoping to bring them back as soon as possible.
On the side of the Raw Fund program, you know, we ran some surveys that indicated that many of them decided to stay since they were already in the US and they wanted to complete their studies. Some went back to take, you know, complete their semester on online courses and found difficulties coming back into the US. So that is another difficulty. And many who are now taking online classes are upset that they are paying the same amount. So there is that also, that they are paying the same tuition cost, and sometimes in living in the US or living in their countries, and so they are not very happy about that.
Yeah, it is a bit of a contentious issue. That's true. Ruth, yeah, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't have a percentage, but I know that most of the students who were not completing their studies decided to remain in their host countries. It was a small percentage that came back home because of the coronavirus. And those who did come back, many of them are now sort of stuck here, especially those who came back from China, because they're not able to get back into China. And so I don't know if they would possibly regret that. Might have been easier for them to have stayed in China, but obviously with fear and being away from home and uncertain, people tend to, you know, it's understandable that they would want to be home and come back to their families. But I think most of them were really committed to completing their studies and their education in the foreign country because they'd already been there for, you know, a year or 2 years, and they thought it would be better for them to stay and complete their studies.
Yeah. And part of the mix of scholarship rules and regulations that we have around the world, some scholarships allow students to stay on after graduation to gain some work experience overseas. Could be for a year, for 2 years. Others, you know, very tight and sort of wanting those students to come back right away. Of course, you know, their experience has been disrupted. Maybe some of them aren't able to get that work experience that they were hoping to. What's your policy on letting students stay in the destination? How soon do they have to return home in normal times? And also, do you think some of those requirements might change going forward to give students a bit more flexibility to have the opportunity to stay overseas or get that work experience abroad before they come back home? Knowing, of course, that work is going to be very different for all of us in the near future, but any thoughts or comments on that side of the equation? What happens after the graduation experience?
Well, I can start with the Raw Fund program. On our side, our beneficiaries can take the 1 year optional practical training. there is a possibility that that incentive won't be there any longer. We don't know yet. There's some level of uncertainty, and it is a disincentive for them because that was part of their whole training, according to come to the U.S. to make connections, the intercultural exchange, the nice networking for life, and then having the opportunity for the OPT. But we allow them to finish their OPT, and then with the commitment that they go back to their countries. So that's on the side of the graph. And
from our side, we've required anyone taking up a scholarship that we're funding to sign a contract and commit to coming back to the country when they've completed their studies. But we've actually had a rethink around that in the last year or so, because we were concerned about students who were coming back to South Africa and struggling to find employment. And so we've now changed our policy to allow them to remain in their host countries for up to 2 years for work experience purposes, and then they must come back home. Then the idea is that they come back not just with the qualification, but also work experience, which would then make them more valuable to the job market. But in essence, what was happening is that people were coming back from overseas with degrees and then remaining unemployed for a period of time. And we didn't want that to happen. But it's also a reflection of our economy and how things are going in terms of the employment rate within our country. And so it wasn't because they'd studied overseas that they were experiencing these problems. It was purely a reflection of how the economy was going or not going.
On our side, we are looking at them, at those possibilities, but right now we require them to come back. And it's part of the agreements we have with our allies and partners. We want to make sure that there's about 1,000 scholarships every year, and we are growing that number because of the virtual possibilities now. But the essence of this possibility for us from the government and the public money that we are investing is that they come back and they are really actually going back to the regions where they come from. So it's part of the idea of the mobility that we are thinking of. We also have, of course, possibilities for them to continue studying. So let's say they have an opportunity to continue for the master's program from the PhD or whatever. So of course we take a look at that possibility and we really make sure that they are staying for the right reason. So they are not staying, let's say, to work in a restaurant, anything like that. So we want them to really do what they have to do. But at the moment, we require them to come back. And it's also part, I repeat, of the agreement with the different governments and institutions.
And Ruth, just a quick follow-up question. With regards to that extension of 2 years that they can stay abroad for work experience, do you think there's a possibility to extend that deadline, given the fact that work is a little bit disrupted, so that face-to-face, work experience that a student could get in Canada and Australia, for example, is a little different in 2021 or maybe even into 2022? So do you think there might be a chance to extend that work experience timeframe?
I think we'd be a bit concerned about extending it too much, because they would have already spent a couple of years in that country, and then after another couple of years of work experience, we may be worried that they would not come back. And obviously, we wouldn't want to see the brain drain happening, or for us as government to be supporting that. As Paula mentioned, it is public funds that we're using. And the idea of sending them abroad is so that they bring those skills and their education back into South Africa. I think, of course, we could be flexible and we could relook at issues if they are, if it would really be necessary for us to extend that. It's not something that's closed and not open for discussion, but I think that we would be very cautious about doing something like that.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit about partner relationships then, and how you're looking at partners and evaluating them. Some things that came up earlier in the week during the symposium was actually a focus on looking towards institutions that offered work-integrated learning, or looking at destinations, of course, that have that ability for students to work overseas in country. We talked a little bit earlier as well about looking at specific programs, but how are some of your partner requirements maybe changing or adjusting? We heard, for example, on Wednesday that in Saudi Arabia, they were actually tightening up some of their requirements and reducing the number of partners that they were going to be working with in the future. Whereas in other countries, they're actually widening things up. We heard from Mexico that actually they're looking for more partners than ever now. They want to find more partners, great, stronger partnerships, and that kind of a thing. So I'm curious about the overall landscape that you might be looking at. Are you looking towards different countries, different types of institutions, different types of programs? What are sort of the priorities when you're evaluating new partners to work with?
Right now, for us in Colombia, we are very, very careful with the partners we're working with, because it's the ICETEX could be like the door, as for instance, Colfuturo, for new partnerships to many institutions in Colombia. So once we say or approve or sign an agreement, it's the government saying, approving that partner. So we are making sure it has all of the qualifications, the reputation, but we are not limiting or reducing partners. We are just very conscious about the criteria that we are measuring. And of course, we are evaluating the experience that our students, our professors are having abroad. So because remember, we are not only talking about students per se, so we are talking about the larger community as they become students abroad. So for us, interesting enough, hearing you say about Mexico is a lot of different countries are getting more and more interested about Colombia. So it's not only outbound, right? It is inbound as well. So a lot of regions here in Colombia are getting ready to partner with more and more and more institutions and governments. So very interesting what has happened in the past months. We are receiving more offers, and we are receiving more doors have been, trying to get to sign an agreement with us. So I think that's a good indicator of how Colombia itself is positioning in Latin America and in around the world. So apart, I suppose, of course, there is kind of, you have to be, as a student, you are careful enough to choose that destination. But I can say from our side, and my colleagues in Latin America, I think, would agree that we are getting more like noticed. And so being part of kind of these events shows the importance and relevance of Latin America in the world map.
Great, good to hear. Lina, what are your thoughts?
Yes, on our side, we are still working with very qualified partners, and we would like to continue finding the right partner for us. The right partner for us, we have a huge reach in the region, the whole 34 member states. We would like to make an impact that includes many more people. That means through virtual learning, qualified online programs, and retraining the workforce has been one of the priorities, which I already spoke about. So technical skills, short-term courses, lifelong learning for all, including the young adult who is in between, and this is where we are focusing our efforts right now. We still work with the governments, with certain partners. We are currently even talking to Colombia as well to partner in a specific area. We've partnered with Mexico and with Brazil. We have a big program. And everything right now, there is a lot of uncertainty, but we continue working with them. And there is also an in-person component. But our goal looking forward is lots of flexibility, inclusiveness, and also the finding a good economic models to work on that brings quality education at an affordable price to a lot of people in the hemisphere. And that includes also, so we are open to work with any country, because we have 69 observed countries. So we can work with France and Spain, and we also work with China and many other countries. So the door is open as well.
Great, good to hear. Ruth, what about your partnerships lately? Are you also seeing more of a drive for more partners with different types of profiles for these partners? Different countries are you looking towards?
I think we're looking cautiously for new partners, and looking at how we can use existing programs to structure those partnerships, because the difficulty is at the moment our budgets are under a lot of pressure. And when the budgets get cut, I think that international scholarship programs are seen as perhaps a nice to have and not a priority when compared to domestic education or health issues, unemployment, those kind of competing issues for the budget. So while we are looking for new partners, at the same time, we have to be realistic about how much we can contribute towards programs. So where partners can also contribute towards the expenses of a scholarship, then that would be something that we would be more interested in pursuing at this stage. But I think that we also know that the current situation is not going to last forever, and sometimes partnerships take quite a long time to establish and get the agreements negotiated and signed, and all of the things in place for a program to actually start operating. So when we're looking at new partners, it's often for the long term, and hopefully within the next few years we will see COVID won't be an issue anymore, hopefully. And maybe there'll be a pickup in the economy, and things will be improving. So we will be able to see more students going abroad again.
Right. Is it too soon to start planning, let's say 2 or 3 years from now? Is it more of a focus for all of you to really just concentrate on the near term 6 to 12 months? It is difficult, as you mentioned, Paula, to do much long-term planning these days. But do we have some kind of ideas about what might be happening in 2 or 3 years from now? Or is it still just too difficult to tell in terms of maybe new partnerships or increased funding, different funding models?
Yes, Jackie, we are working to set the foundation for what we know it will work. So our reality changed, and now virtual and online programs are here to stay. So before they had more doubts, and here, especially in Colombia, but now they're here. So from the government, we are providing that foundation so that this can go on. Of course, we are changing the model of how we invest our funds. So instead of, we're working with different countries at the moment, like Switzerland, like the United States, like France, like Spain, for instance. So we are cooperating and we come together with 50-50, and we are providing the universities, for instance, with the Model 100K program, we just launched it last week for Colombia again. So what we're doing is telling the universities, hey, we don't know everything, but we provide you with the tools so that you can tell us what's your interest, what are your priorities, where do you want to focus, and how is it that you have been doing it. That could be, a case of study, so that we can provide you with some means so that you can, like seed money, so that you can go on. So this grant model has been working very well in the past months, and I think that's where we are going to focus. On the other hand, we also administer the different scholarships for Colombia, as we are the institution from the government that deals with that in Colombia. So we are working with our partners, just making sure we are making the right decisions in the near future. So what we are doing now is strengthening our internationalization. That's what we are doing, trying to help our higher education institutions through this very difficult time. And so we just want to make sure, like, everybody now really understands that internationalization is not only mobility, and that also we need to be very close to students and the higher education institutions. So we are also working on a reform from ICETEX. So we are working to be closely with the students so that they can make better decisions, and with the higher education institutions accompanying them. So at the end, they can make the decision, am I going to work and find a very good job, or I'm going to be an entrepreneur? So we are working on providing them with those skills.
Excellent, great. And so nice to hear as well that things are continuing with that online focus as well, because there's sort of this question, if face-to-face mobility resumes and, COVID is a long distant memory for all of us, we can hope someday, does that mean that online education again kind of takes a back seat? And we touched upon this in some earlier sessions in terms of the silver lining being that now governments and employers are accepting of online education. Will that change going forward once we can get on planes again, or is that kind of a movement that's here to stay now? So it sounds like from ICETEX that is here to stay, which is great in terms of the flexibility that's offered. Lina, Ruth, do you agree or disagree? Do you think online is here to stay in terms of providing funding for online experiences? Maybe not 100%, but let's say a percentage of a scholarship, if it's done online and not face-to-face, that would be part of your program going forward no matter what?
Yeah, on my side, really quick, I believe that online programming is here to stay. We still need to tackle the barrier of the discrimination that happens with the access to internet, for instance, but the governments in the member states, remember that as a political body, we also have the ministerial meetings of labor and education. They are very well aware that strengthening the qualifications of teachers to impart online training is crucial. Validating online courses, having the best platform for that, and mainly, of course, is having internet access in remote areas. So in our case, we continue, on the Rafan side, we still continue validating the intercultural exchange in person, the scholarship programs up to a certain degree, but with regards to the online learning, I believe it is here to stay. With regards to how long this COVID situation will remain haunting us, it depends, because we foresee for next year that there will be fewer enrollment, but I believe that those who are already in the US will remain until they complete their studies. And that also depends on the Office of International Service, how well they are treated during these difficult circumstances. I put myself in the situation of each university, and I know how difficult the decision making is and how difficult it is to choose where you put your funding when you have your own faculty, staff, you have your own locals, and then you have the international students, and all that needs to play so that at the end, at some point, with some sense of normalcy, we can go back to having the in-person exchange.
Yeah, I think that the online learning is definitely here to stay. I think at the time, or just before COVID, we were still grappling with it a bit. Universities were still developing their online programs, and we weren't really very sure how we were going to receive it in the mainstream, I think. But COVID just made us rapidly develop that, and I think that probably is the silver lining, is that the development of the online learning and pedagogy kind of came without the planning. It just happened, and everyone had to just get on board, whether they wanted to or not. And I don't think that's going to go away. I think that will be a legacy, and possibly a positive legacy of COVID. But at the same time, we also need to look at issues around access that Lina mentioned. I mean, here, not all the remote areas will have really good connectivity. We've also got high data costs, which is a big barrier. And we've made some inroads for institutions to provide data for students, and the mobile network providers to provide discounted data for students through the universities as well. But still, access can be quite a barrier for many students. And at the end of the day, I also think that the online remote learning can't ever really replace contact learning and face-to-face learning in its entirety. There will always be programs that need laboratory work or field work, besides just that need for human interaction that we all have innately in us. So I think that some sort of combination will probably be the way forward, but I don't think it's going to go away at all, and I think that's a good thing as well. But especially when it comes to international scholarships, that full immersion into a foreign culture and country is also part of the learning experience. And without that, we've also got to start looking at what are we trying to achieve, what are we trying to gain by sending students abroad.
Yeah, and we've got the students in focus now. So I want to ask a few quick questions about their experiences, how you're tracking their satisfaction levels, the outcomes of their experience. What can you tell us about the contact that you've had with your students this year, and how you might be able to track their satisfaction, let's say in normal times versus now? Is anything changing for you in terms of keeping those close contacts on your students and measuring the success of the scholarship program and the impact that they have?
More variables are in place. So before it was like the academic variables of it, but now I believe the other kind of variables took, more like the priority, how to say that, the primary space of them. So being able to call somebody and talk about how they feel, now it is more important than ever. So I believe I heard a lot of frustration this year, of course, from everybody, but at the same time, our students very brave, and they were up to that situation. So how they behave, how they found in themselves all of these competences that they didn't know they had. And so just facing pandemic in your country at home is one thing, but when you are abroad, that's a completely different thing. So I believe all of them did a very good job, and they are doing a very good job in staying safe and healthy and following the guidances of the universities, institutions, and the governments. Because in a foreign country, of course, you have different rules. So I believe satisfaction now, it's also about that, I was able to talk, I was able to find, guidance. I was, so those factors are now becoming more and more and more important nowadays. That's how I feel. So let's see in a year from now how we can relate, how we can compare the different statistics. But now, of course, we are monitoring them more than ever. So we never did a monitoring as closely as we are doing it now, and it has helped us also get in touch with even families here or there. So just making sure everybody feels that we are close and we are with them in this.
So as mentioned earlier, for us, it's been an amazing demonstration of resilience, but at the same time, we've seen their, frustration and instability in terms of to afford tuition and continue living under this uncertainty. They truly appreciate now our help, for instance, with the emergency scholarship, because it gives them an opening hope to complete their studies. They are also very grateful for those universities who've been helping them out, going the extra mile with any kind of accommodation, and even psychological, because a lot of them have reported that they feel very isolated. So the resilience varies among them. They are also very, very disheartened because of the devaluation of the currency, and it's a reality, because the pandemic united us, all humanity, in this situation. So back home, they are also struggling. Their families had a business. Certain governments, of course, are asking that the business continues paying their employees as it should be, but then there's very little money for them coming from their families at the moment, for instance. So, and there are some situations that are more difficult than others, but hopefully with the help of universities and committed community, as it is in the US, they unite to help out. And with the help of our program, they can complete their studies, which is, I think it's crucial. Once they are here, they need to complete their studies.
That support for the students, though, is really important for them, and we found an increasing number of students, just like Paula and Lina said, that are having isolation issues or need some sort of psychological help or counseling. So we've also tried to put our students in touch with counseling that's based here in South Africa, even if it's through email or WhatsApp or Skype. so that they can feel a bit closer to home, and also because the kind of support that they get at their host institutions varies so much. So, some institutions have got amazing kind of support for international students, and other institutions are not able to provide the same sort of resources, especially during the lockdown period when everyone was forced to remain within their dormitories. I mean, they were sharing a very small space with another student, and there's not much space for them to get out, and or they're not allowed out. And I think that had quite an impact on their emotional state during that period. And we did find a lot more of our students contacting us during that time. But now that the sort of hard lockdowns are over, things seem to be improving, and I think the student satisfaction has been relatively high, especially in countries where there's been a good response and a very supportive response by those governments around international students and their support for them during this period.
And you mentioned some institutions being standing out for you in terms of memory of what they were doing for students to support them. Are there any examples that you can think of things that you've seen universities do that really impressed you and your colleagues?
I mean, in general, what the Irish government did was around the support that they provided to students or international students that were in Ireland, was to provide sort of additional financial support for them. And I mean, in general, they've also got a very supportive system for international students. And so that's something that has stood out for us. And whereas I wouldn't want to talk specifically about negative cases, but we have had students who have felt like they've been very isolated and have not received the information or support from their universities, and ultimately they've had to turn to us. In South Africa, it's very difficult to provide that kind of close contact support for students when you're on the other side of the world. But obviously, you have to try, and you can't leave them without any responses at all. But it's been difficult because there's very little that you can do when someone is in a foreign country.
Well, sometimes just being there, being that voice, letting them know that they can reach you. I would venture to say that, from a student demand perspective, they're looking very carefully when they're considering their institutions to see what did those institutions do to look after students during this year, during these difficult times. And so interesting, Ruth, that some of your partners have stood out in terms of exemplary student support and service, whereas others maybe didn't quite meet expectations. Does that sort of change things for you as a funding provider to sort of look towards the institutions that did really go above and beyond? It could change things in the minds of students and their decision making, but it can also change the way that we look at our partners. Does that have an impact for any of you?
Definitely, yes. Definitely, yes. And those are the factors to consider in the future to renew a program, and so we are all learning about this. But of course, this humanity part of it now really plays the role, and that's more important now than the academic role that you are just expecting that is going to happen. So just when you receive news like the university sent somebody to make sure the person was accompanied while going to the hospital, something like that, you say, well, thank you. You didn't have to do it, but you did it. So you went the extra mile, as Lina said before. So that's exactly what we're looking for. We're not saying that we're going to ban anybody from this, but of course, we're saying that working with this humanity, it helps a lot to encourage students to visit or scholarships to be given to this kind of institutions and governments, of course.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we're pretty much coming towards the end of our session. Before we wrap up, any final thoughts on, let's say, some inspiring stories that maybe you've heard this year, some fantastic partnerships that came through for you this year or that you're looking forward to next year, maybe certain strategies that helped you overcome some of the challenges. Any final thoughts to leave our audience with today?
I just wanted to mention that I think COVID has brought out, also, allowed us to see the best in some people. And, I think we spoke a lot about the resilience and the learnings that our students and even us and the things that we've taken from it, and how we can now shape our policies and improve the way that we do things because of what we've learned during this difficult time. And it will help us to plan for the future a bit better, and any other emergencies and difficult situations that come up, we'll be better prepared for them going forward. And although this has been a terrible year and it's been a difficult year, I think we can learn a lot and improve things going forward because of it.
I believe that this pandemic has definitely disrupted modern society, and that has also tested all of us, and in terms of our resilience, and most likely won't be the last one. So it's preparing all of us to also think outside the box. One of the things that is coming out is also doing research with others around the world. I mean, with this kind of network communication and social media, the use of the technology for a purpose that is the humanity is, I have a lot of hope with that. Lots of research and cooperation and coming out with newer and better technology for all of us to continue communicating. And I totally agree with Ruth that the human touch and the coming back to seeing another place doesn't have a price. And we hope that is, will continue for years to come.
Yeah, well, I'm very thankful to BMI. Thank you so much for events like this and for all of the colleagues, because we still believe in this and we are working for this and make it happen. So one of the sectors that we thought was going to be, and it was greatly impacted by COVID, was of course our field. And so of course we could have gone in a different way. This is it, and but on the contrary, I found you magnificent ladies, or all of the colleagues that are watching, is like, we believe in this and we think that we are making a difference, and that one exchange, one program, that one online scholarship would change the lives of many and impact in our territories. So I'm grateful for this kind of events, that even during this pandemic, we found the way to come together and to share our experiences. And when years from now, when we go back and we see what we did, I believe we hope we are going to be very proud of this moment, hopefully.
I think so too, yes. And as you say, sometimes it just comes down to that one student, that one partnership. All it takes is just making a difference in one person's life. And that can change everything. And whether that sparks a whole sea change or whether it's still just that one person, it still has the impact and it still matters. So very inspiring thoughts to leave us all with, I think, today. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing your insights today and throughout this week in all of those productive meetings that you've had. I hope that we're all encouraged now to keep innovating, to keep pushing for change, and keep embracing this disruption that we're facing. Because as you said, in the end, when the pandemic is behind us, we will look back, we'll ask ourselves, what did we learn? How has this changed us? How are we better now than we were before? So it feels to me like this is the beginning of a new era for flexibility and for experimentation, and an exciting time for us in international education to further enhance the student experience, the student support, and to find new ways for our students and for each other to connect globally. So thank you to our amazing panel today for sharing your energy and your knowledge and those inspiring examples. And thank you to all of our attendees for your time and your attention today. Thank you once again. Do stay safe in the weeks and months ahead, and keep in touch, because we've got much more coming for you next year. So thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.